People like you don't belong in first class." The words dropped into the airplane cabin like a blade, sharp, cold, and absolute. They echoed beneath the pale white LED lights of Coastal Air Flight 1729, making every head jolt for a beat before turning toward the same place, a black woman in a deep navy blazer, standing motionless, as if time itself had clamped around her in the narrow aisle. Dr. Amelia Carter did not answer right away. She simply looking straight into the eyes in front of her, the eyes of Lisa Morgan, a 38-year-old flight attendant, whose slightly lifted chin carried the posture of someone wielding authority without thinking. The insult that had just left her mouth still trembled in the air as if it had weight. No one touched it, but everyone felt it. The boarding pass in Amelia's hand trembled once, not from fear, but from the effort it took to hold down her anger, the way someone holds a burning blade. Seat 2A, her name first class. Clear. Clean. Undeniable. Yet seat 2A was already occupied. Brandon Miller, 47, one hand on his phone, one leg crossed claiming both armrests, as if he had been born into them. He looked up at Amelia with a tilted, arrogant smile. "You heard her?" he said, throwing her a cheap glance. "Some of us actually belong here." A slap without the hand. Tyler Nguyen, 21 in row 5, lifted his phone. The camera turned on. A tiny red light appeared like the eye of a witness that never goes silent. The live stream began. In the cabin, whispers rippled outward like small waves. A woman whispered, "Oh God." Another murmured. She paid for that seat, didn't she? But no one stood up. No one wanted to disturb the familiar ritual of accepting injustice that society had quietly normalized. Lisa folded her arms and tilted her head like a teacher, scolding a slow student. "Ma'am, economy is at the back. This section is for premium passengers. Please don't hold up our departure." Her voice carried that polished politeness, the kind with a blade inside. When Amelia offered her boarding pass, Lisa glanced for exactly 1 second, then pushed Amelia's hand down as if swatting away a free flyer coupon. "Honey, people try this all the time. You're not the first." The entire cabin inhaled at once. The air thickened. Amelia lifted her chin. Her eyes did not shake, did not drop, did not retreat. "I paid for this seat," she said, her voice low, deep, calm, in a way that felt almost dangerous. But Lisa didn't hear. Didn't want to hear. "Ma'am," she said louder, making sure the passengers behind could hear, "I'm going to ask you one last time." And at that exact moment, Brandon Miller let out a small nasal laugh. A tiny sound, but enough to expose the invisible hierarchy at work in the cabin, the power of someone who had always been told he belonged. "Just take your real seat," he added. "We have a schedule." Amelia didn't turn, but her gaze made Brandon pause for a heartbeat. For the first time that morning, he sensed something wasn't aligning. That gaze did not belong to someone being humiliated. It belonged to someone who knew exactly how much power she held, but hadn't used it yet. Tyler whispered into the live stream, "Y'all, this is about to blow up." More than 300 viewers, the number rising like a pulse. The door light blinked as the gate agent stepped inside. Evan Rodriguez, 29, quick, surprised, confused. Lisa beckoned him over like summoning a judge. "This woman is refusing to move. She's claiming someone else's seat." Evan looked at the boarding pass, looked at the system, looked at seat 2A. His brows knit together. "System shows Mr. Miller checked in for 2A at 6:10 a.m. Amelia raised her phone. A timestamp glowed on the screen. 5:47 a.m. She held it up. "And here is mine." A moment of silence, a moment cracking open. But Lisa cut in instantly, smashing the truth like an empty can. These things glitch all the time. She probably used miles from someone else. It happens. A lie breathed out, as naturally as air. Behind them, a woman rose. Laura Bennett, 52. I saw her board with first class. Her ticket looked right. Lisa turned her smile, now sharp as a blade. "Ma'am, please." "Some passengers think rules don't apply to them," Tyler whispered. "Oh, hell no, 700 viewers now," Brandon muttered. "Unbelievable." And then the situation outgrew a flight attendant. It outgrew the cabin. It became a live wire. Airport security appeared at the door. Officer Diane Brooks, 44. Professional, steady, trained to keep order, but not trained to tell truth from assumption. "Ma'am," she said, "I'll need you to step aside." The words landed like an eviction, a verdict, a sentence pre-written for those deemed out of place. Tyler spoke directly into the camera. "Guys, this is discrimination." Straight up, 1,200 viewers, trending in Boston in 5 minutes. But all that tension, all that storm coiling in the aisle did nothing to shake Amelia. She stood straight, did not step back, did not bow. "Officer," she said softly, "are you aware Coastal Air has a policy protecting passengers with confirmed seats?" Diane hesitated. Evan looked down at his tablet, searching for passenger rights. The whole cabin held its breath. Everyone knew a storm was forming. But no one knew whose storm it would be, the woman being insulted, or a system used to crushing those it believed weaker. Lisa folded her arms again, smiling like victory was already signed. If she keeps refusing, we'll have to deplane her. Good Brandon said some of us need to get to meetings. But what they didn't know was that they had just said that to the worst possible person. Amelia unlocked her briefcase. A small metallic click rang out a tiny sound that pulled the entire cabin into absolute silence. She took out a black leather case, embossed in silver. When she opened it, the cabin lights gleamed on the words engraved inside Carter and Ross Aviation Law Group. Evan blinked. Diane frowned. Tyler practically shouted into the live stream, "She's a lawyer! Oh my God, not just a lawyer. One of the top aviation attorneys in the country. The woman who had won cases that forced CEOs to resign. The woman invited to federal hearings. The woman whose slightest legal move could cost an airline tens of millions of dollars." But Lisa didn't know. Brandon didn't know. And Coastal Air, unfortunately, didn't know either. One thing, however, was certain: the story had just turned. And real power, quiet but absolute, had just stepped onto the stage. This was only the first minute of the battle. But the way Amelia stood, the way she held that black case, it was not the posture of a victim. It was the posture of someone preparing to flip the entire board. And from that moment on, the whole flight, the whole society would witness exactly what happens when a system built on oppression collides with the one person it should never have touched. They were about to remove the wrong woman, and the price would be very, very high. People expected Amelia to back down when security arrived, but she remained standing like a stone pillar in the narrow aisle, the white cabin lights reflecting off the straight bridge of her nose, and the calm, steady gaze that made anyone watching feel suddenly uneasy. Officer Diane Brooks stepped forward, her voice still professional, but no longer as certain as before. Amelia looked directly at her, not trembling, not resisting, with only one thing in her eyes: absolute control. Evan Rodriguez was still scanning the data on his tablet. He searched the information again and again, his movements slowing as if he had found something that did not match, but lacked the courage to say it out loud. Lisa Morgan stood right beside him, her lips curved into an early victorious smile, the kind worn by someone who believes their authority is permanent. Brandon Miller leaned back in his seat, with folded arms looking down at Amelia, with the same generational judgment society had repeated for decades. Tyler held the camera, his breath quick and uneven. The viewer count had passed 2,000. Everything was boiling over, and no one in the cabin understood that one more sentence, one wrong word, would make everything collapse in a way they could never imagine. Amelia closed the document case and held it with one hand. The movement was small, but it created an invisible pressure that made some passengers hold their breath. She took one step forward, not to challenge, but to force everyone to confront the truth that they had crossed the wrong person. Officer Brooks glanced at the black case for a moment, then raised her eyes to Amelia's face, trying to determine what exactly was unfolding. Amelia spoke in an even, firm voice, not loud, but powerful enough to break through the suffocating tension of the cabin. I will leave this spot when Coastal Air complies with its policy protecting passengers with confirmed seats. Right now, that policy is being violated in front of everyone here. A wave of murmurs rippled through the rows. Someone whispered under their breath, almost talking to themselves. She knows the law. Evan swallowed hard. He stared at the screen again, then lifted his head, speaking so quietly it was clear he didn't want Lisa to hear. "Boss the system, something is wrong." Lisa immediately turned to Evan, cutting him off like a blade. "Nothing is wrong. Follow procedure." But by now everyone could see things were slipping out of her grasp. Brandon scoffed. "I do not understand why this is still going on. It is obvious who belongs in that seat." The cabin tightened, as if it were watching a predator toy with prey, unaware that it was the one being hunted. Amelia did not look at Brandon. She did not need to. She said one sentence, "Light as a breath, yet heavy as a gavel. What you see does not determine the truth." Evan's voice trembled. "I need to call up a management." Lisa snapped around. "Evan, do you want to be suspended?" But the threat no longer carried weight. Not when dozens of cameras were waiting to capture every misstep she made. An older woman spoke up from behind her voice, raspy but sharp. "She is being treated unfairly. I have flown for 40 years. I know what this is." A man nodded. This is not her fault. Yet they want to drag her off just to prioritize that man. Tyler adjusted the camera, capturing every face, shifting from silence to anger. Other phones rose through the cabin, evidence growing by the second. Amelia stepped forward half a step and stood directly beside row 2. She did not raise her voice. She did not plead. She simply allowed silence to do the work. Then she opened the black case again, gently, as if revealing a verdict. Inside were folders marked with federal seals signatures belonging to people with national authority in the aviation industry, documents a regular flight attendant would not dare to look at for more than a moment. When Evan's eyes accidentally fell on the title of the first page, his face drained of color. Lisa had not seen it. Brandon had not seen it. But Evan understood. Officer Brooks understood. And a few sharp passengers understood that this was no longer a customer service dispute. This was a national-level strategic mistake. Amelia closed the case and spoke in a low, clear, precise tone. "I repeat, I will leave the plane as soon as Coastal Air honors the commitment it made to its passengers with confirmed seats." If not, this conversation will not end inside this cabin. A heavy silence dropped through the cabin like a thick curtain. No one spoke. No one dared. Because they were beginning to realize the woman they were trying to corner was not someone who could be pushed back. In that moment, the direction of the story changed. Not because Amelia broke any rule, but because the entire system had backed the wrong person into a corner. And from that corner, she was preparing to step out with a force they had never imagined. Everything shattered in an instant the moment Derek Collins appeared in the cabin doorway. His eyes swept the room, trying to project calm authority, yet every step he took revealed that he believed he was the highest-ranking figure here. He spoke a sentence he sounded like he had waited his whole life to use. What exactly is going on here? Lisa immediately twisted the situation to her advantage. You came just in time, Derek. This passenger is trying to take a first-class seat and is refusing to move. She delivered the line like she was presenting a finalized verdict. Derek shot Amelia a look full of judgment. The way he stood, the way he narrowed his eyes, the way he emphasized each word, made it clear he had already chosen to believe his staff long before checking the truth. He was the kind of man ready to crush anyone to defend the system he believed belonged to him. Amelia said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence alone made Derek impatient. He turned to Evan. "Give me the data." Evan swallowed hard and lifted the tablet. The system displayed 2 timestamps. Brandon checked in at 6:10, Amelia at 5:47. The truth lay bare on the screen. But Derek glanced at it briefly, then nodded in the exact opposite direction of reality. In cases of conflict, we prioritize the passenger recorded earliest in the system, and the system shows Brandon first. A lie so effortless it did not even require breath. Lisa nodded along. Brandon smiled triumphantly, as if they had silently signed a secret agreement of deceit in front of the entire cabin. Passengers around them began whispering. She checked in earlier. Why are they saying the opposite of the data? Tyler raised his phone higher, the live stream passing 4,000 viewers. Rage was building fast in the comments. They are trying to remove a valid passenger. This is blatant discrimination, someone shouted in the chat. Is any lawyer watching this? And inside the cabin, everything shifted again when Sarah Lee stood up. A 33-year-old journalist from the Boston Herald, who until now had quietly been recording, stepped forward and spoke in a voice soft but sharp as a scalpel. "Excuse me, but I am press. And what I am seeing shows clear signs of systemic discrimination." The entire cabin turned toward Sarah, then back to Derek. Derek stiffened, but hid it with a cold expression. This is simply a misunderstanding about seat assignments. A pre-programmed line slid out of him, but not in Amelia's eyes. She opened the document case again. The golden cabin light reflected off the edge of a page, stamped with a federal seal. Brandon raised an eyebrow, and for the first time in all this chaos, he saw the word federal on Amelia's documents. His body froze for one fraction of a second, a tiny moment, but enough to signal danger. Amelia didn't look at Brandon. She looked straight at Derek, her gaze unshakable. "Mr. Collins, you just deliberately misinterpreted procedure in front of witnesses and the press." Her voice was low, steady, sharp, like a sentence already delivered. The air suddenly grew heavy. The whispering stopped. Tyler spoke into the live stream without even bothering to whisper anymore. "She knows they are breaking the law." Evan took a step back. Officer Brooks tightened her grip on her radio, her eyes shifting from doubtful to alert. Amelia closed the case and tapped her finger lightly on its lid. A small sound, but one that made anyone who understood legal power shiver. I will clarify this right now. No one knew what she planned to do. No one knew the wave that was about to crash. But everything became clear when she took out her phone, swiped it open, and the name of the person she was calling lit up the screen. No background music, no dramatic cue, just a single name enough to suffocate the entire cabin. Thomas Miller, Office of the Chief Executive Officer, Coastal Air. The moment the call connected, the cabin fell into total silence. Not a single loud breath. Not a single hum of the engines seemed to exist anymore. Only one voice echoed from the other end of the line, overpowering everything with the authority of the man who led a national airline. "Amelia, what is happening on our flight?" Derek's face drained of color instantly. Lisa's lips collapsed inward. Brandon's eyes widened. No one could mistake that voice. It was the CIO. And they had just antagonized the wrong person. Amelia looked directly at Derek while she spoke. A first-class passenger with a confirmed seat is being removed from her seat by your staff. She delivered every word as if placing a blade on the table. In the cabin, the entire facade of the system collapsed. No more whispers. No more laughter. No more pretending not to see. That moment revealed one truth: they had not just insulted the wrong person. They had insulted the one individual capable of tearing apart the entire machine they clung to. And this was only the beginning. The call with the CEO exploded like a lightning strike inside a sealed pressure chamber. But the most terrifying part was not the CEO's voice booming through the speaker. The most terrifying part was the absolute silence that followed a silence so total it felt as if the entire cabin collectively acknowledged they had just witnessed the moment power shifted. Thomas Miller on the other end of the line could not hide the tension in his voice. "Who is involved in this?" Derek Collins opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Lisa stood frozen like a statue. Brandon stared at the armrest as if it could answer for him. Amelia didn't look at anyone. She simply stood tall, her voice steady enough to be frightening. "Your staff, including Flight Attendant Lisa Morgan, Flight Manager Derek Collins, and the passenger occupying a seat. He is not entitled to Brandon Miller." The entire cabin shifted their gaze toward Brandon. He swallowed hard. Every bit of color drained from his face as he realized the situation had evolved from chaos to a full-blown family disaster. The CEO was silent for 3 seconds, 3 seconds long enough to choke the entire room. What is he doing in her seat? 2A. Lisa attempted to jump in her voice, thin and shaking. We thought she did not belong." The CEO cut her off. His tone forged from steel, not loud, but crushingly heavy. "I did not ask what you thought. I asked why my staff is removing a confirmed passenger from her seat." Evan Rodriguez inhaled sharply. That question was not meant to find an answer. It was a sentence. Amelia looked at Evan. His eyes showed a war inside him. He knew the truth, but someone with more power than him was listening to his every word. Evan stood straighter, his voice trembling but clear as metal. "Ms. Carter checked in first. Her ticket is valid. There is no actual system conflict. The information that was reported was incorrect." A vein twitched violently at Lisa's temple. Derek snapped his head toward Evan, but the CEO's presence through the speaker held him in place, like a hand around his throat. Amelia continued, her tone slow but precise, each word cutting with surgical accuracy. "In addition, you should know your staff fabricated a non-existent procedure to remove me from my seat, publicly humiliated me, and threatened to forcibly remove me despite my confirmed documentation. The CEO's voice dropped lower, so heavy the cabin felt like it tilted under its weight. "I want to speak with you privately." Amelia didn't move. "No, Mr. Miller. The people here need to hear all of this." The entire cabin turned toward her. Passengers held their breath. Tyler's live stream hit 6,000 viewers. Sarah Lee raised her camera to eye level, her hand tightening around it, with the instinct only seasoned journalists have when they recognize a history-defining moment. The CEO shifted his tone, less authoritative, less guarded, the tone of a man who had just realized his system had failed in the most public and catastrophic way. "Amelia, I apologize on their behalf. This does not reflect Coastal Air's values." Amelia replied instantly, firm and final. "Do not apologize to me. Apologize to the people who have watched this happen their entire lives without the power to speak." The words fell like a judge's gavel. A passenger clapped once, then stopped abruptly, afraid they had broken some invisible rule. But the cabin was cracking. The line between silence and outrage was stretching thin. Brandon attempted to speak. I didn't know who you were. Amelia looked straight at him. "You do not need to know who I am to treat me with respect." Brandon sank back into his seat, learning a lesson he never imagined he would face. The CEO returned his voice, cold and sharp, each word snapping like a branch. "What I am hearing constitutes a serious civil rights violation and passenger protection breach. I am connecting legal counsel to this call. Do not take any further action until I give instructions." Derek looked as if the blood had been drained from him. Lisa stood rigid like stone. Brandon clutched the armrest with white knuckles. But the most frightening person in the room was still Amelia, standing calm, silent, powerful. She did not need to shout. She did not need to threaten. Her power came from the simple fact that everyone understood she could dismantle the entire system with a single email. But she had not done it. Not because she was weak, but because she was waiting. Everyone in the cabin sensed it. And nothing is more terrifying than waiting for a storm you know is coming. A small voice rose from row 4. "Excuse me, why did this even start? Because she does not look like someone who sits in first class." A question, but it was a torch thrown onto a pile of gasoline. Amelia looked at the woman. No anger. No bitterness. Just truth. "I didn't start this. I simply refused to disappear when someone else decided my place for me." The live stream surged by several thousand more viewers. The CEO inhaled deeply, his tone shifting again, formal and cautious, the tone of a man who finally understood that this incident was no longer a service mishap. It was political, legal, and national. "Amelia, I am sending legal representatives to gate A12. I need you." She cut him off softly, but with unshakable certainty. "You will need more than that." The cabin was no longer a cabin. It had become a closed courtroom. Someone had committed wrongdoing. Someone had stood up. Someone had stood on the wrong side. A system had cracked underfoot. And in the center of it all, Amelia remained standing at the eye of the storm. Calm as the quiet before a hurricane. No one knew what the next chapter of this storm would look like. They only knew one thing for certain: they had awakened the wrong person. Real power had not even been used yet. But it was coming. No one in the cabin was breathing normally anymore. Every breath came fractured, stuck in their throats, as the figure of Captain Jonathan Reeves appeared in the aisle. He did not walk fast. He did not speak quickly, but his presence carried the weight of a courtroom that had just come to order. His eyes swept across every face, every raised phone, every strained expression clinging to the air. He stopped directly in front of Amelia. Standing there, he became the boundary between two worlds, one built on truth, the other desperately clinging to lies dressed up as authority. He spoke in a low, compressed voice, but every person heard him clearly. I am the commanding officer of this flight. I was informed that you are causing a disturbance and attempting to take a seat that does not belong to you. The entire cabin jolted slightly, as if his words had sliced through the very air. Amelia stood still, her shoulders unmoving. She did not blink. She did not defend herself. Her silence made many passengers feel as though they were witnessing someone stand directly in front of a blade without stepping back. Captain Reeves turned to Derek and Lisa. Explain. Lisa rushed in first. Her voice hurried, as if afraid she would lose her chance to shape the narrative. She refused to leave the seat. She was uncooperative. She did not provide valid documentation. Derek jumped in, trying to reclaim control. The system displays that this seat belongs to another passenger. There is no conflict unless she forces one. Captain Reeves nodded slightly, as if hearing something reasonable. But he had not yet looked at the truth itself. When he turned back to Amelia, his sharp gaze seemed to measure her worth in just a few seconds. Show me your ticket. Amelia extended it. No trembling, no haste. She held it at eye level, not lowering her head. Captain Reeves examined the ticket, the information, the confirmation stamp. Then he looked back at Lisa. Why did you not check this? Lisa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Half the cabin held its breath. The truth had begun to reverse direction. But it was not enough. Derek tried again, desperate to salvage what little control he thought he had left. Captain, the system shows Amelia did not let him finish. She stepped half a step forward, the black case in her hand, like an unspoken warning. Your system is wrong, and your staff used incorrect information to remove me from a seat I paid for, insulted me in front of passengers, and threatened to forcibly remove me from the plane despite my valid documents. Her voice was not loud, but every word fell like a hammer, striking a steel table. Sarah Lee lifted her camera higher. Tyler whispered, but the live stream had already exceeded 8,000 viewers. On the phone, CEO Miller was still listening, and everyone understood he was not just listening with his ears, but with fear tightening around his throat. Captain Reeves looked at the black case in Amelia's hand. 3 decades in the cockpit had sharpened his instinct for danger, and he sensed immediately that the threat did not come from the passenger, but from whatever lay inside that case. His voice slowed as though he needed certainty before continuing. What is in that case? Amelia opened it. No theatrics, no rush, just the calm act of placing the truth in full view. Inside were federal documents, advisory contracts, aviation, safety evaluation files, seals and signatures of people with more authority than anyone in that cabin had ever met in their lives. Evan Rodriguez visibly jolted. Lisa's breathing turned uneven. Derek looked as if someone had ripped out his spine. Brandon Miller collapsed slightly into his seat. A passenger in row 3 whispered under his breath, "My God, who is she?" Amelia closed the case with precision, her voice straight as a laser cut. "I am a federal legal advisor in aviation safety, and your airline has just violated multiple passenger protection policies in front of dozens of witnesses and 8,000 viewers on a live stream. Somewhere behind them, someone dropped a water bottle. The sound was not loud, but it rippled through the cabin like the aftershock of an explosion. Captain Reeves stepped back half a step, not because he was weak, but because he understood this was no longer about a seat. This was no longer a minor service incident. This was a violation capable of wiping out the careers of an entire chain of command, if not corrected immediately. CEO Miller's voice cut through the phone, sharp as an emergency directive. "Jonathan, listen to me. No one is to touch Ms. Carter. No one is to remove her from her seat. And no one is to take any action until I give direct instructions." The cabin quivered, as if the plane itself leaned with that command. Lisa bowed her head, her lips drained of color. Derek lowered his eyes, unable to face anyone. Brandon hunched over, staring at the floor. Tyler exhaled sharply into the microphone. This was the moment power reversed, and no one in the cabin had the words to describe what had just happened. Until Amelia spoke. A single sentence, simple, cold, and sharp enough to split the entire atmosphere in two. "This is not over." The silence that followed was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of people who realized that everything they thought they knew about power had just been destroyed, and the real storm had not even begun. No one in the cabin knew where to look after Amelia's words. They stared at the ceiling, at the ground, outside the window at each other, as if searching for an escape from the growing realization that everything was spiraling far beyond their control. But no one moved faster than Derek. He stepped back once, then forced his shoulders upright, trying to reconstruct whatever tattered authority he had left. His voice dropped heavy with forced weight. "We still have the right to handle this situation under internal procedures." Amelia turned her head toward him slowly, like turning the edge of a blade. "Internal procedures do not stand above federal law, and you broke your own procedures from the very first moment." Her voice was not loud, but each word cut straight through the last remnants of his control. Lisa clutched her notebook so tightly her knuckles turned white. She tried to jump in desperate, like a drowning person grabbing a straw. I was just doing my job." She was in the wrong section. Amelia looked at her as though staring through a thin mask. "I have already proven my ticket is valid. I have already proven I checked in earlier. I have already proven your staff repeatedly provided false information. If that is what you call doing your job, then the job itself is flawed." Lisa's face burned with humiliation. A woman in row 4 said, softly but clearly, "This is the moment you should stop." Tyler kept filming the live stream, passing 10,000 viewers. The comments overflowed with outrage. "Remove her and see what happens. They are destroying themselves on camera." God, this is a life lesson. But the tension had not dropped. It was about to explode harder, sharper, deeper. Brandon Miller suddenly shot to his feet. The reflex of a man used to being prioritized, a man who had never truly felt fear. He pointed at Amelia, his voice loud and urgent, driven by a lifetime of unchallenged entitlement. "This is the most ridiculous thing I have ever seen. I am a platinum elite frequent flyer. I have sat in this seat for 3 years. I have the right." Amelia looked up at him, not angry, not shaking, not defensive, but with a silence that stopped him mid-sentence, as if his throat had been gripped. She spoke in a tone so low one had to listen carefully to hear, yet sharp as an absolute verdict. "You do not have the right to take something you did not pay for." Brandon opened his mouth, but nothing came out, as if he had swallowed a truth he had spent his entire life avoiding. A moment later, CEO Miller's voice returned through the phone, sharp, urgent, cold. "Brandon." "Sit down." The cabin shifted, as if hit by an invisible force. Brandon looked around at the cameras, at the dozens of eyes pointed straight at him, then dropped into his seat, as if the floor beneath him had cracked open. The CEO continued his voice, exerting such control that the entire cabin fell into absolute silence. "I have directed corporate legal representatives to Gate A12. All staff involved will remain where they are. No one is to touch Miss Carter. No one is to take any further action." And Brandon, he pressed each word as if grinding them under the weight of responsibility. "You are not to leave seat 2A. One sentence, but it locked an entire man in place like a binding order." Amelia remained standing, calm, not triumphant, not satisfied, simply silent, the silence of someone who understood that justice does not require shouting. It only needs to stand in the right place. A middle-aged man in row 6 spoke quietly, yet his voice rang like a bell. She just forced an entire system to stop, something no one has ever done. Sarah Lee angled her camera, capturing Amelia as if documenting a historic moment. But the biggest shift had not yet come. It came from Evan Rodriguez, the least powerful person among the staff, as he opened his mouth. His voice trembled, but each word was a blow struck against the system that had swallowed him for years. I have to say this. Miss Carter did nothing wrong. I saw the system. I saw the check-in. And I heard what they said about her behind her back. The entire cabin froze. Derek snapped around, his face flushing red. Evan stepped back half a step, but he did not stop. He looked straight at Amelia, as if returning something she had awakened inside him, a courage. They said she did not belong here. They said they would handle it to prioritize the right kind of passenger. I cannot stay silent anymore. The whispers erupted like flames thrown onto gasoline. A passenger cried out, "My God, they really said that." Another person stood abruptly. "Unbelievable." Tyler zoomed in on Evan's face, capturing the moment a man shattered the invisible chain society had placed on him. Derek completely lost control. "That is enough, Evan. Be quiet." Evan did not quiet. For the first time in his life, he did not. "No, I cannot let them blame her for something that was entirely our fault." And the moment he said it, something shifted across the cabin. The air grew so heavy it felt like even the jet engines outside had fallen silent. Amelia looked at Evan. She did not smile. She did not tear up. She simply gave a very small nod, a recognition, a thank you without words. And that was the moment Derek shattered. He no longer had moral standing. He no longer had authority. He no longer had control. He had only one thing left: fear. Fear so palpable that Amelia could feel, it could sense that the next stage of this confrontation was no longer about who was wrong first or who spoke first. It was about the truth she had revealed from the beginning, the truth they refused to see. They had awakened a force they could not contain. And the next chapter of the storm was approaching like metal tightening in the air. No one could stop it now. The cabin door opened again, and this time it was not a crew member or a passenger, but someone summoned directly from the airline's legal headquarters, Marianne Holt, 50 years old senior legal counsel for Coastal Air. Her steps were quick and precise, radiating the energy of someone used to fighting battles in boardrooms, not inside airplane cabins. But when her eyes swept across the scene, before her dozens of phones recording passengers, standing flight attendants, shrinking into themselves, a manager frozen in place, and a black woman, standing tall and silent at the center. Like the calm eye of a storm, she stopped for half a second. That half second was enough for everyone to understand one thing. Even the airline's top lawyer had not been prepared for something this catastrophic. She stepped forward, her voice tight with control. "I am Holt, legal counsel for Coastal Air. I was instructed directly by CEO Miller to handle this emergency incident. I need to know who initiated the original report." No one answered. Derek stood stiff, as if nailed to the floor. Lisa stared at the ground, as if trying to swallow her own shadow. Brandon sank deeper into his seat, arms crossed but trembling. Tyler's live stream murmured in the background, the sound of truth being recorded in real time. Marianne turned to Amelia, and the moment she saw the black document case in Amelia's hand, her eyes flickered. Not because it was elegant, but because she recognized the symbol of a legal threat the airline had spent 2 decades trying to avoid. "Dr. Carter, I need you to confirm what actions were taken against you by Coastal Air staff." The entire cabin fell silent. Not because they doubted the answer, but because they knew the answer would pierce through not only the guilty, but the entire structure above them. Amelia spoke slowly without a tremor. "I was insulted because of my identity, told I did not belong in first class, denied the validity of my ticket, threatened with forced removal, targeted with fabricated procedures to strip me of my seat, and treated as if I were attempting to steal a place I fully paid for." Marianne didn't nod. She didn't object. She only tightened her grip on her folder. A passenger exhaled sharply, as though hearing an indictment against the entire aviation industry. Amelia continued, not raising her volume, but each word dropped the temperature in the cabin by 1 degree. "The most serious part is not how they treated me. It is how they believed it was normal." A woman in row 3 burst into tears from the tension. A man in row 6 shook his head repeatedly, as if trying to shake off the shame on behalf of the entire system. Marianne turned to Derek. "Mr. Collins, I need your honest statement. What I have heard from the CEO and witnesses here suggests this issue goes far beyond routine error." Derek choked. Lisa stepped back again. They looked at each other, not to find solidarity, but to see who would drown first. Then Evan, the only one among the employees with courage, spoke again. "I will give the statement. Because if I stay quiet, I am no different from them." The entire cabin turned to Evan. Tyler whispered into the live stream, "This is the only person in this system with a conscience." Evan took a long breath. "Ms. Carter is telling the truth, from beginning to end." Derek snapped reflexively. "Evan, you do not understand." But Marianne raised her hand and sliced through his attempt. He is allowed to speak. Evan did not stop. His voice grew stronger, clearer, as though every sentence was freeing him. "I heard them say she did not belong here. Right before boarding, they said they would handle it to prioritize someone more fitting. They knew the system had an error, but pushed her out anyway. They wanted it done quickly because they assumed no one would notice. But the live stream captured everything. The entire cabin gasped as one. Lisa began to cry, not out of remorse, out of fear. Derek went pale, his hands shaking violently. Brandon bowed his head, unable to meet a single gaze. Marianne looked at Evan for a long moment, then said a sentence that shifted the air in the cabin. "Thank you. Coastal Air needs more people like you. Not those who hide wrongdoing." Derek grasped at one last thread of hope. "I can explain." But Marianne cut him off instantly. "No need. Everything is clear. No one spoke, but everyone understood. In corporate culture, everything is clear is the end. Sarah Lee whispered into her camera, her reporter's voice, low and trembling, with the weight of history. This is no longer a discrimination incident. This is a systemic, intentional violation confirmed by internal staff. We are witnessing the collapse of an entire power structure. Amelia said nothing. She simply stood there, silent, the embodiment of power that doesn't need to shout. CEO Miller returned to the call, his voice no longer that of a leader instructing subordinates, but of a man who suddenly realized the foundation of his entire company was cracking beneath him. Marianne, initiate red-level emergency protocol. I want a full report today. No concealment, no edits, no erasures. Every violation must be documented and sent to me. The entire cabin heard it. The entire cabin understood it. The entire cabin shuddered. An airline had just announced it would dissect itself in front of the public. Holt nodded. Then she turned to Amelia, her voice soft but unwavering. Thank you for standing tall. Thank you for refusing to be pushed into silence. Amelia looked directly at Marianne. I did not do this only for myself. One sentence, but it carried the weight of history. In that moment, the entire plane understood this was no longer a story about Seat 2A. This was a story about an entire society, and the storm had not even reached its center. A burst of radio static snapped at the cabin door, sharp and cold, signaling someone rushing in from the hallway. It was Robert Hale, 46 years old, head of airport operations for Coastal Air. A man used to coordinating dozens of flights per hour stepped into the cabin, looking like someone who had just realized he would have to face the one thing no executive ever wants to touch: a mistake capable of burning down an entire corporation. Hale looked around. He looked at the phone's recording, at Derek's stiff, frozen face, at Lisa's red, swollen eyes, at Evan shaking but standing upright. Then his gaze stopped on Amelia, calm, still, unmoving, the only point in the room untouched by the tension, stretched thin as glass. Hale swallowed, once the movement visible in his throat. He stepped forward, trying to keep his voice neutral, though fear sat thick beneath it, the fear of a man who knew the system he managed had just exploded. I have received direct instructions from CEO Miller. This is now a red-level emergency. All personnel involved are suspended from duty immediately. Lisa dropped her notebook. The sound was small, but to everyone in the cabin, it felt like the sound of a career collapsing. Derek tried to speak, but Hale lifted a hand to stop him. No words, just a gesture, carrying the full weight of orders from the top of the chain. Hale continued, his voice steady and low. For now I am taking over direct management until the CEO arrives. Passengers murmured. Tyler slowly panned the camera from Hale to Amelia, to the faces draining of color around them. The live stream surpassed 12,000 viewers. Hale looked at Amelia as if searching for a shred of hope. But there was no hope in this situation, only the truth they had tried to bury beneath layers of procedures and customer service smiles. Ms. Carter, on behalf of the airline, I want to fully cooperate with you. All relevant data will be provided to you and federal authorities, if needed. A woman in row 5 muttered, "If needed, needed a long time ago." Hale heard her. He did not argue. Brandon Miller had been frozen for minutes, but only now did true panic spread across his face. He jumped to his feet, desperate to defend himself. I did not know she was Amelia, cut him off her voice, low, not loud, but enough to choke him instantly. I do not need you to know who I am for you to behave with basic respect. That does not change your responsibility." Brandon collapsed back into his seat, like the air had been sucked from his lungs. Hale stared at him, longer than necessary. Then he spoke calm and direct. "Passenger Miller under instruction from CEO Miller. You will remain in your seat until the internal investigation team arrives. You are not permitted to leave this aircraft." A gasp rippled through the cabin. This was no longer a seating dispute. This had become an active investigation conducted in real time under the eyes of dozens of cameras. Sarah Lee zoomed in on Brandon's face, speaking with the clarity of a seasoned reporter. "This is the first time I have witnessed an airline detain a passenger inside the cabin during a discrimination incident. This shows how severe the airline believes this situation is." The cabin froze around her words. It was not just commentary, it was a public verdict. Hale inhaled deeply. Then he turned back to Amelia. "I want to ensure you feel safe. If you wish to step off the aircraft for a private discussion, I will escort you through a priority exit." Amelia shook her head, gently but firmly. "No need. I will stand here until everything is resolved publicly in front of the people who witnessed it." Hale looked at her, and in that moment he understood more clearly than ever in his career that some people do not need power to exert pressure. It is their uninterrupted silence that terrifies an entire system. Evan lifted his head, looking at Amelia like she had opened a door he had never dared touch. A passenger whispered. She changed everything just by standing straight. At that exact moment, Hale's radio buzzed again. CEO Miller's voice came through, no longer sounding like a corporate commander. It was the voice of a man who realized his own brother Brandon had triggered a firestorm capable of collapsing an entire corporate merger. "Robert, I am on my way to Gate A12, and I want everyone to hear what I am about to say." The cabin went silent as a midnight chapel. Amelia stood still. No step forward, no step back, no emotion displayed. She was waiting. The whole country was waiting. Then the CEO spoke. Each word dropped like a declaration of war against the very system he oversaw. From this moment forward, the entire incident will be handled with the highest level of transparency. No exceptions, no protection, no privilege. No one breathed. No one moved. Hale bowed his head. Evan closed his eyes for a second, like a prayer. Lisa sobbed harder. Derek looked ready to disappear, and Brandon, once convinced he was entitled to everything, now sat curled in his seat like a child caught cheating in class. The CEO continued, his voice sharp enough to cut the cabin in half. And most importantly, this is no longer an internal matter. This is now a national-level issue. The sentence sliced through the room like hot metal plunged into cold water. Passengers shuddered. Tyler whispered into the live stream. 15,000 watching, and it is still rising. In that moment, everyone understood what was coming was not the end of the incident. It was the beginning of a national confrontation. Amelia stood there, silent, cold, unmoving. The storm had reached its center, and the center was her. Gate 12 felt as heavy as a sealed courtroom when CEO Miller finally arrived, stepping into the cabin with the look of a man who had sprinted across half the airport, yet was forcing himself to stand with the dignity of his position. His presence shifted the entire atmosphere, as if the power structure of the room had been flipped on its axis. He scanned the scene. Lisa curled into herself, Derek pale and sunken, Brandon folded into his seat, now a distorted shadow of the arrogance he once displayed. Evan stood upright, his hand still trembling, but his eyes no longer those of someone afraid. And finally, the CEO's gaze reached Amelia. No one heard him breathe, but everyone sensed that the oxygen had left his lungs before he even spoke. "Dr. Carter, I want to formally apologize to you on behalf of Coastal Air." It was an apology, yet it sliced through the air like a blade. Amelia did not respond immediately. Her silence was not acceptance. It was the silence of someone who demanded that truth be placed exactly where it belonged. The CEO turned to Marianne Holt and Robert Hale. "We begin now." And in front of everyone who witnessed the incident, the entire cabin leaned toward him, waiting to see if he would truly dismantle the internal shields built to protect the very people responsible for this disaster. He stepped deeper into the cabin, positioning himself between Amelia and the employees at fault. Nobody missed the fact that he kept a visible distance from them, as though standing too close might pull him into the wreckage. He spoke his voice steady, not loud, but each word landing like a stone on steel. What happened today is the most severe crisis ever caused by Coastal Air's passenger service division, and I will not call it a mistake. No one dared to move. He looked at Lisa first. "Ms. Morgan, your statements to Passenger Carter are a direct violation of our anti-discrimination policy and caused real harm to her dignity." Then at Derek. "And you, Mr. Collins, you fabricated procedures, distorted data, provided false information to the captain, and security attempted to blame a passenger and escalated this into a situation with potential for forced removal." Derek's shoulders collapsed. Lisa let out a small sob. The CEO continued, but his voice was no longer aimed only at them. It was aimed at the entire cabin, at the dozens of phones recording at the tens of thousands watching the live stream. And let me be clear so everyone here understands, no passenger is ever to be removed from an aircraft because of their skin color, their appearance, or the prejudice of a staff member. Not a single one. The sentence made the entire cabin turn toward Amelia, as if no one needed further explanation that what they had just witnessed was exactly what should never have happened. Amelia remained still, her expression neither angry nor triumphant, only sharp and calm, a kind of strength that made everyone feel they were witnessing something far greater than a mistreatment incident. The CEO took a long breath. "And now to the part I must address directly with you, Dr. Carter." He faced her, fully refusing to look away, understanding that a single step back would destroy whatever authority he still held. "I am not asking for your forgiveness. I am asking for your transparency. I am asking you to allow me to handle this incident at the highest level of the company." Amelia answered with a single sentence that tightened the entire cabin like metal being forced into a mold. "I do not ask for apologies. I ask for accountability." The CEO nodded, but his eyes revealed he understood. After today, it was not only he who would pay the price. The entire Coastal Air organization would be forced to change. And society would have to look at this incident and ask, how many times has this happened when no one was able to stand where I am standing now? Only when Amelia spoke that sentence did everyone realize this was not the end of the storm. This was the moment the eye of the storm expanded and pulled the entire world into it. CEO Miller stood before the entire cabin, no longer as an executive directing staff, but as a man confronting the raw truth of a broken system he had allowed to exist for far too long. He looked at Amelia, and understood that he no longer controlled this story. The power had shifted to the woman standing still in the aisle, a woman who needed no raised voice, no title, only the truth. He spoke, his voice roughened, but still carrying authority. I will address this immediately, and not only within Coastal Air. I will take the entire matter to the executive board and to federal authorities, if necessary. Each word made Lisa shrink, as if swept by a cold wind. Derek gripped the seat edge like a man about to drown. Brandon covered part of his face, realizing every privilege that once held him upright had been pulled from under him. But Amelia continued to meet the CEO's gaze without the slightest shift. She said, slow and clear, like delivering a verdict, "I am not standing here to destroy an airline. I am standing here to make what should have been right from the beginning right again." The cabin went completely still. A woman in row 3 nodded, eyes red. A man in row 6 placed a hand over his chest as if steadying himself. Tyler, with more than 20,000 people watching the live stream, whispered softly enough for the microphone to catch. "This is not an incident anymore. This is history." Evan instinctively stepped closer to Amelia, as if compelled not by obligation, but by conscience. Hale and Marianne Holt exchanged a glance, both fully aware they were witnessing the collapse and reconstruction of an entire system in a single morning. The CEO spoke again, his voice dropping like a vow. "Dr. Carter, I request permission to publicly release all recordings, testimonies, reports, and investigative findings. No concealment, no edits, no protection for anyone." The sentence clenched the cabin like a tightening fist. They had just heard a CEO voluntarily place his own company under national scrutiny, something unheard of. Amelia replied with a slight nod. Not victorious, not proud, simply the acknowledgement of someone who had dragged the truth into the light. Then the CEO delivered the final line, the one that made everyone understand change had just become inevitable. From this day forward, the way Coastal Air treats its passengers will be rewritten, starting from this moment, starting with you. The passengers exhaled, not in relief, but because they knew they had just witnessed the beginning of a new era. Amelia stood at the center of the cabin, her gaze steady, unshaken, unwavering. She had not simply reclaimed a seat. She had redefined the place of justice within a system that once believed it was stronger than the people it served. The storm had passed through its center, and it left behind one undeniable truth: justice had prevailed. Amelia's story does not simply expose the wrongdoing of a few employees. It reveals a far more painful truth that injustice never begins with dramatic acts, but with distorted norms repeated so often that people start believing they are acceptable. Yet from the moment one person dares to stand tall, the entire system is forced to change. The power of truth does not lie in noise, but in unwavering resolve in the face of any authority. If this story makes you believe that justice must be protected through real action, then like and subscribe to help spread the values that matter, and leave a comment with the words "Stand Tall."